In this episode of Real Recovery Talk, we are discussing the top 5 reasons why people leave treatment early. If they leave early, they're not healing. They're not getting the full benefit of treatment. That is what we are discussing in this episode. Enjoy. Later. Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad, and in today's episode, what we are going to be discussing is what are the main top 5 reasons as to why people leave treatment early. Substance abuse treatment in particular. So let's just get right into it. First thing is first, though, we have Benjamin B. right here.
What's happening, everyone?
So for those of you that don't know, we have a YouTube channel. You can go on to YouTube and just search for Real Recovery Talk and you will find us there. And we put all of our content out there. And you can also go to realrecoverytalk.com, and at the bottom of that homepage, you're going to see a little tab thingy and it says live chat, and you can click that and it will basically just give you an opportunity to send us a message. It will come to either myself or Ben's cell phone, and we will get back to you within moments. We promise. Right, Ben?
We definitely promise.
Okay. All right, let's just get right into it. Top 5 reasons as to why people leave treatment early. Number 1 is they're in denial that there is even a problem. So a lot of times when people come into treatment, I tell people all the time that they're not coming like willingly. Oftentimes it is one of those things where you have to kind of strong arm people into even going to treatment, into committing to go anywhere. And oftentimes you have to hold interventions, you have to take things away from them, like if you don't go to treatment, you're not going to be able to live here anymore. If you don't go to treatment, I'm going to take your kids away. Or if you don't go to treatment, I'm going to, not pay your rent, or whatever the case is. Fill in the blank. So when people come into treatment that way, it's not wrong. And like I tell everybody, get into treatment any way that you possibly can. Whatever you have to say, whatever you have to do to get somebody into treatment, because we're dealing with life or death. But you can see how when they get to us, they may still not believe that they have a problem, if it is something that was forced on them. Ben, would you agree?
Yes. I'm also going to throw something from the other perspective, though, too. Denial of a problem. Who's that coming from? The addict or the loved one? Because actually, within the last couple of weeks, I did receive an interesting phone call, somebody looking for some help. And it was actually that individual, the addict themselves, wanted help, and they told me how much they were using. I was like, yeah, that's the amount you need some help with opiates. And basically it was kind of funny because the loved one got on the phone and said, oh, it's not really that bad. They don't have that bad of a problem. So this can come from any part of the family dynamic too, not just necessarily the addict themselves. There's a lot of outside influences, so I just want to throw that part out there.
Yeah, and and to just kind of stay on that for a moment, that's why we tell loved ones too, when somebody comes into treatment, the people that they hold dearest to their heart or their closest relatives or friends or whoever it is, we tell them stay as uninvolved as you possibly can unless invited. In other words, don't talk to them, don't communicate with them, because a lot of times loved ones, they have a totally different perspective as to what this whole addiction thing is. And they think, well, my son wasn't living underneath a bridge and he still managed to have his job and, yada, yada, yada. So he doesn't really have that big of an issue, but he's in treatment and he ended up there somehow. So just wanted to throw that out there. And go ahead.
I also want to touch on the type of help needed, where the loved ones or the addict themselves like to dictate what kind of help, because it was interesting that case in particular. I got the opportunity to do like a conference call with the husband and the wife together, and it was funny because I came around. I'm like, well, we do agree that he does need help, correct? And she's like, yes, but he doesn't need that kind of help. And she wanted to, like, basically say, this is what he needs to do. He needs, and kind of drawing up their own plan. And I'm kind of thinking to myself, so why are you calling a professional, someone with experience to begin with, if you're going to call up and then tell them what you're doing? I mean, I understand, like, at least be open to hearing the suggestions and then say, that's just something we can't do because of X, Y, Z. But it's pretty interesting how that unfolds.
Yeah, that's like the last time I called my auto mechanic and he told me what was wrong with the car, but I told him, well, no, actually it's this. I just wanted to see if you had any idea. Just kidding. As people progress in treatment too, over the course of 30 days or 60 days or whatever the case is, a lot of times the way that they felt going into treatment is totally different than the way that they feel, say, 2 weeks from then. As time goes on, people tend to start feeling better. And then all of a sudden, the addiction starts creeping back in and maybe telling them, this was just a phase. This really wasn't this wasn't a big deal, And so that starts creeping up into their mind. They're feeling good. They feel like they got their pet back. The cobwebs have cleared out of their head. And so, you know what? I don't need this treatment thing anymore. And, it's really unfortunate because that is when people will tend to leave early. They'll leave treatment. The better that they start feeling, it fosters that you know what I'm saying, Ben?
Absolutely. If I have to ask you a question, Tom, what is the preferred length of stay if you had to throw a number out there? It's give or take, but on average.
If depending on resources, 90 days. 90 to 120 days is going to be, in my opinion, the kind of the key.
I'm right with you.
All right, moving on. Number 2. The number 2 reason as to why people will leave treatment early is the program is just too difficult. Maybe it's challenging. And I know here at Rock Recovery Center, we challenge people all the time. I mean, that's the way to grow and the way to make good progress throughout this whole treatment experience is you have to be challenged. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. If I wasn't challenged getting sober, then it would have been a lot easier for me to get sober, but I wouldn't have had that growth, and chances are I probably wouldn't have gotten sober. But so we kind of structure it to where they're being challenged every single day. The last episode last week that came out was all on adventure therapy. And you heard in there me talk about how we purposely make the adventures challenging. We make these things difficult for them. That way they are constantly having an opportunity to grow because they're getting through the other side of that. But, Ben, what do you think? I mean, a lot of times people just aren't up for the challenge.
We've talked about this in the past. I do not want anybody coming in here and getting straight A's in treatment. And what do I mean by that exactly? Coming back to if it's not a challenge, if it's not difficult, it means that, not a lot of growth is happening. Where one thing, and we'll be touching on this a little bit later in some of our other points, but, you have the opportunity to pick up some tools here. But what about the opportunity to apply those tools? And it's in those moments of confrontation and those overwhelming feelings or the rapid change in lifestyle. All of a sudden you have to kind of adapt to being in a treatment center, following some rules. You're being shuffled around from group to group. You got to get on a van. You're being asked to wake up at a certain time. That stuff, it is difficult to adjust to, especially when maybe you've been on the streets, using. You don't have to get up at a certain time. You just kind of, time to go see the dope dealer, whatever time that is, But the thing is, we want the opportunity to have some confrontation with people because the confrontation that happens in treatment is the perfect time to learn to apply the tools. Learning about the tools, that's cool, but it's the application of these tools that's actually the hard part. Kind of, we talk about nutrition and diet here a lot at Rock Recovery Center because of our fitness component, but it's kind of like studying up on a diet and knowing all the ins and outs of it. That's easy. It's the application that's hard, and that's kind of where I'm going with that. We want the opportunity for it to be difficult,
Man, that you just kind of hit the nail on the head for me when it comes to that whole diet thing and knowing everything about the diet, but actual application is the hardest thing. And that's so true for people when they're new in this whole recovery journey, because it's about application. You can have all the tools in the world, but if you don't know how to use them, what good are they? So that's why, that's why it needs to be challenging, but we're also there to teach them how to use these tools. And I think it's worth saying too, when people are challenged, when especially drug addicts and alcoholics newly in recovery, when they're challenged, they can very easily take that and spin it. And I'm saying this so loved ones you can know and recognize, like they can use, if they're challenged, they can spin that and make it seem as if like, hey, you know what? I don't really need this. This isn't challenging for me. I know all this stuff that they're saying, it's the same thing over and over and over again. It's very repetitive. I don't need to be in this house. They're really preventing me from progressing because I can't go get a job, so on and so forth. They can come up with 1,000,001 reasons as to why it's not challenging, but in reality, they're just not up for the challenge and they can't really hack it.
So I play the role a lot of the times here as a liaison between the loved ones and the client. And what's kind of funny is I get phone calls all the time. The client will call their loved one back home. Let's say in this case it's a parent, and then I get a call all of a sudden from mom. Hey, my son says that you did XYZ to him and you guys aren't being good to him and you're giving him a hard time and he didn't get to do this or do that. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. We take a step back and I explain the other side of the story, so kind of, what Tom's throwing out there too, I think is part of the understanding. If you're a loved one at home, please expect your loved one to be uncomfortable in this process. Like we see it all the time. Well, this isn't the right place. I need to find another place. And generally what it comes down to is you got a king baby or a queen baby. They're not getting their way. For, I don't know, maybe the first time, maybe not, I don't know. But regardless, be aware that is going to happen. It happens all the time.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Number 3, withdrawal symptoms. Generally, when people come into treatment, I know for us, when people get to us, they have anywhere from 5 to 30 days of sobriety. Oftentimes they come to us, they're within their first week of sobriety. They're getting out of detox and then they're coming to us. And so they still feel like crap. I mean, let's be honest. They've been shooting dope for the last 10 or 15 years, go to detox, and then they come to us and maybe they don't feel too good, which is totally understandable and totally expected. But that causes people to go back out, not being able to get through that uncomfortable period of withdrawal. And, the only thing that they know that can cure that is to go back out and get drugs. And unfortunately, we see that not all too often, but it does happen. And people, they don't give it a chance. They don't let those withdrawal symptoms subside. And next thing you know, they're out getting dope or a bottle of whiskey or whatever the case is. And Ben, talk about how anxiety and depression really can play into that as well.
Well, it's important to recognize necessarily the post-acute withdrawal too. So when a client comes to us, they're just getting out of detox. They might be past the worst part of their withdrawal. Say we're 25, 30 days in, and talking about the anxiety and the depression. The anxiety might not be a 10. Maybe it's a 4. And the depression might not be a 10, but it's somewhere around a 7 or an 8. But basically speaking, it's really important to recognize that, I'll say to a client, are you sure you're not just experiencing some post-acute withdrawal and not in your right mind? Be aware, you've only been clean for 3 weeks. It's gonna, cognitively speaking, you're not 100% yet, and that anxiety, that depression, it can bring people right back out. And they're basically, one of the rebuttals I get from the client is, no, I'm not in withdrawal. I'm not, and they relate that to being completely dope sick, and not understanding the lower end of the spectrum with the post-acute withdrawal, where you're still just not thinking quite right. You know, in the depression, the anxiety, depression's a killer. Man, it takes people right back out a lot of times, and we see the early signs of that a lot of times. You know, clients that it's hard for us, and we got to figure it out on a regular basis. You know, what's the difference between somebody who's not motivated and someone who's truly clinically depressed? You know, it's up to us as professionals and the clinicians to kind of figure that out, you know, because we get both. Going back to, like, you know, our first point of being in denial, or maybe you feel like you don't need help, you know, that's someone who's unmotivated to seek treatment. But what happens when you come across somebody who's truly clinically depressed? They might kind of look the same, you know, neither one wants to get out of bed, but you sit in that long enough, you know, it'll eventually take you back out. People leave treatment all the time over that. You know, I'm just not happy here. I'm depressed. You know, you're not necessarily going to leave here and all of a sudden not be depressed.
Right, and I think it's important for us to be able to decipher between the two, because if somebody is legitimately clinically depressed, it is our responsibility as a facility to be able to help with that and to be able to diagnose that. And through our doctors and psychiatrists and stuff like that. So it's really, you know, we have to do a good job at that. But then there's the opposite side of, like, okay, you're just lazy, you know? And so maybe they don't leave treatment early or prematurely, but they're asked to leave because they're just not willing to change anything, you know? They're not willing to get out of bed. They're not willing to go look for jobs. They're not willing to get a sponsor to work steps or fill in the blank. They're just not willing to progress in their recovery, and so they have to administratively be asked to leave.
It's also important to recognize whether or not the depression is something that's, you know, part of their chemical makeup and maybe something that's going to be lifelong, or if it's, you know, you get out of detox and all your neurotransmitters are completely depleted, your dopamine, your serotonin, all your regulation of your neurotransmitters. Like, is this a temporary depression? Is it temporary anxiety? You know, if somebody's coming off of benzodiazepines, you know, the anxiety will lessen over time. But again, it comes up to us utilizing our medical doctors, our psychiatrists as a team to kind of figure that out and really look at, is this something that's going to be permanent and, you know, through a lifetime, and someone needs some sort of non-narcotic to help and assist with that? Or is it just simply maybe they need a little lifestyle change, a little exercise, and this is just part of the post-acute withdrawal? You know, it's important. And coming back to leaving treatment too early, we need enough time to figure that out. I can't figure that out. Our team can't figure that out in 2 weeks. You know, I always tell people that it generally takes us about 3 weeks of somebody being in treatment to really start getting into the good work. You know, it's not like you step foot in treatment and all of a sudden, like, you're digging deep. You know, it takes us 3 weeks of counseling and interviewing, basically finding out about the person's past, you know, any traumas, etc. You know, it takes someone about 3 weeks in some cases to completely open up, and for us to be able to see the patterns and the behaviors that are being shown through the treatment process to really do good work on it.
Yeah, and I think too with anxiety and depression, I know for myself, it like played an effect in all of every decision that I made when it came to getting clean and sober. You know, where my recovery was in general, anxiety and depression for me played an effect in all of that. Like it didn't make me want to go and look for work because I didn't really feel like getting out of bed, or I didn't want to do X, Y, and Z because of the anxiety feeling that it would give me. It was very anxiety provoking. So anxiety and depression can play an effect in all of these different things that we're discussing today. And is oftentimes a reason why people can never have that lifestyle transformation. They really can't, because they can't get past the anxiety or past the depression. And that's where, you know, a good team of people around them, obviously in their corner, cheering them on and, you know, helping them get through that stuff is going to help them progress greatly. All right, moving on to number 4. Doesn't think treatment is effective. Okay, so Ben, let's talk about this. All too often, we see people come in. I've been to 10 treatment centers. This is just, I'm over it. I know what I need to do. You're not teaching me anything that I don't already know. I'm sick of sitting in groups. I'm sick of processing my feelings. I'm sick of all this stuff. This is pointless. It's not going to do anything for me. Blah, 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 blah.
For me, this comes back to the point of maybe you've been to 10 treatment centers and you say we're not going to teach you anything, but if you've been to 10, we have the opportunity to teach you how to apply this stuff. Clearly, you didn't learn the important part. And it's you never know what kind of experience you're going to have too if you don't give it a shot. And the thing is and negative past experiences, you don't know what those outside influences were in the past that brought you to where you're at. At the point of going back to the application stuff, it's knowing the tools and applying them. Two totally different things. I mean, that's and if you go back to the unrealistic expectations as well, I'll throw it out there, man. Treatment centers aren't perfect by any means. Why? Because they're run by human beings. Human beings aren't perfect. Actually today I had to apologize to a lady. I promised her I'd look into something and it totally slipped my mind, but it's you're shaking your head. But being a good treatment center and honest, like you go, hey, I messed up, and clients have to understand that as well. Parents have to understand that as well. Having realistic expectations that every facility, everything's going to go absolutely 100% perfect with no human error. Yeah, get a life, and I'm just being straightforward about it. So the other thing about not thinking it's effective, how do they measure that? There's one of the classic examples, and this is just very simple for me to hit home. When I run groups, one of the things if we get into the topic of 12-step programs, and you get an individual who says, well, I'm not into 12 steps. 12 steps don't work. I say, have you ever tried it? Oh, yeah, I tried it. I'm like, oh, so how'd your step 9 go and your step 12? Tell us a little bit. Well, I never got that far. So, just a simple, did you really do it? Or did you just kind of show up to some meetings, That's just a simple example. You can apply that to any other modality, again, the application or truly seeing the process through.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. And I think another thing to talk about is when people get this, we call them institutionalized and repeat offenders, or I like to refer to it as this like hamster wheel. They get on this hamster wheel and it's just like running around this hamster wheel, and the hamster wheel is treatment. And then they fall off, and then they go back onto the hamster wheel, fall off, and you get the point. But what happens is people can get so discouraged, right? And just thinking, then next thing you know, they're adopting this mentality of, this is pointless. I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to get sober. This treatment center isn't going to be able to tell me anything that I haven't already heard before. It's the same stuff, just in a different building, different people, yada, yada, yada. And that's a really disheartening place to be, because every single time that you go to treatment, I mean, it is an opportunity to grow, and it's an opportunity to learn something new. But we already are going into it with this negative mindset and this negative mentality that you're not going to be able to tell me anything that I don't already know. The only thing is I can't apply it. So it's an uphill battle for us. Now fortunately, we do things totally different than most treatment centers do. And we have different things that we apply and different ways that we go about things. And the fitness component is a huge thing for us, and the adventure component's a huge thing. So they get to see different aspects of it, and we kind of come at it from a different angle.
Let me touch on this real quick. One of the things I throw at clients all the day, this actually just all the time. I had a client the other day walk out of group. He comes pouring out like, oh, I hate this. I'm so tired of this. I've been to 100 groups, and I don't get anything out of it anymore. Exactly what we're talking about. And I asked him, I said, So what do you bring into group? And one of the things I come at clients with, if you want to get something out of group, you better bring something to it. This idea that you're going to be able to sit there and learn through, what is it, osmosis?
Sure.
Basically speaking, like, start bringing something to. When you go in there with enthusiasm and not having contempt prior to investigation, like, give it a go. If you truly have been to 10 treatments, you probably have something to offer somebody else in there. And one of the things that I always like to tell people in early recovery is try and find a purpose, and something as simple as bringing hope and inspiration, or teaching someone else in group that might not know what you know because you've been to 10 treatments and this is their first one. Like, maybe take the time to teach them something. Maybe you might get something out of teaching somebody something rather than coming here to do all the learning.
Yeah. Give them something. Stop being a taker all the time. Why don't you give something?
Exactly.
No, that's good. All right, moving on. Number 5 is already have the tools to stay sober. Oftentimes people come in here and they're like, again, this kind of ties into number 4. You can't teach me anything that I don't already know. Oh, really? Well, obviously we can, because you're still here. But there is also it's an application thing. They're just not able to apply it, and maybe they haven't really been given the opportunity to apply it. Look, we're the first to say that you have to have a good environment. You have to have an environment, or provide an environment for people to want to apply the tools that they've been given. And if they're somewhere where it's just an absolute shit show and nobody cares about being sober and nobody wants to be sober and they're just there for free rent or whatever the case is, the likelihood of them using their tools are slim to none. And so, yeah, they may have all the tools to stay sober, but they're not in an environment that fosters sobriety. And I don't care what it's like going onto a construction site and having, you're building a house all out of wood, but the only thing that you have is a concrete mixer. That was good. You have to have the right tools for the right house. In other words, for us, if you have the tools, you have to be in an environment where you can use them. Ben, really quickly, anything more on that one?
Not really. I think accidentally kind of touched on this over and over through the first 4 points. Maybe it's just a summary of those 4 that, again, coming down to application. I don't know how else to put it.
All right, number 1, again, denial that there is a problem. Number 2, the program is too difficult. Number 3, they're still going maybe through some withdrawal symptoms. Number 4, they don't think that the program is going to be effective. What else are you going to teach me that I don't already know? And number 5 is they have the tools to stay sober already. Ben, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no. That sums it up, man.
All right. That is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. And if you want to be in contact with us directly, like I said at the beginning of the episode, you can go to www.realrecoverytalk.com. And at the bottom of that screen, you will see a little button that says Live Chat. Click that, and you can get myself or Ben directly. Also, this is on YouTube. So if you're listening to it on a podcast, you can go to YouTube and find us at Real Recovery Talk. Hit that little subscribe button, hit that little bell thingy. Every time we put a new episode out or a new piece of content, it will notify you. And that's it. Stay sober, my friends. We love you, and see ya later.
Later.